Now let's come to our last but very exciting component. That's a panel discussion. So to help with the panel discussion, I have 5 speakers here. So just a quick cap. So Kevin and Albert from Trend Michael will join, and also Kevin will join the panel. We have 3 other speakers here. So we have Andrew from BlueCat. Andrew is the Chief Strategy Officer at BlueCat. We also have Erkang, Zheng. Erkang is the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer at LifeOmic. We also have Hammoud, Rabah, Director Cloud Security Integration from Royal Bank of Canada. So here is our virtual panel here. All right, so I think we have already introduced Albert and Kevin. So for Andrew, Erkang, and Hammoud, maybe you can give a quick introduction, like 2 minutes for each.
Sure thing. So thank you, Bryan. So Andrew Wertkin, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at BlueCat Networks. We are a networking security company here in Toronto. I've been at BlueCat for about 6.5 years. I started as the Chief Product and Technology Officer, sort of transition role, and very much focused on today what's happening in the market and how that guides our product strategy, our market strategy, and how we ensure that our products and services meet the requirements of our customers. We're sort of right in the middle of hybrid cloud adoption and cloud native development in general. So this topic is very near and dear to me, but also through my 25-year career, so I've migrated from building on-premises software to building cloud-native software, and so it's also near and dear to what I'm passionate about, which is the development of software. So thank you very much.
All right, cool. That's Andrew from BlueCat. Erkang, maybe you can start.
Yeah, sounds good. So this is Erkang Zheng here. I'm based in the US. I am the CISO for LifeOmic. I'm also the founder of Jupiter One. So LifeOmic is a startup, and so is Jupiter One. We were building software in AWS. So LifeOmic builds cloud-based big data analytics, machine learning focused software for healthcare, for cancer research and genomic studies and so on and so forth. And we also built a set of mobile apps for wellness and kind of direct consumer-facing, patient-facing mobile apps that integrate with the healthcare platform. And Jupiter One, the platform, the product that I founded, is a cloud-native security and compliance platform that is built on a graph data model that allows kind of easy queries to solve that kind of needle in a haystack kind of problem for security teams. And really glad to be here and chat with everyone, share my perspectives on Agile Cloud security. So we as a startup is born native, digital in the cloud, where we're 100% digital and on AWS. Previously, I was the head of software security at Fidelity, and before that, many years. And for myself, I actually went through massive digital transformations when I was at Fidelity. And I've seen firsthand the challenges of the contention between security teams and DevOps teams while everybody's trying to move fast, but move fast in a safe way. And there are there's certainly a lot of perspectives that I'm hoping to share here with everyone. Thanks, Bryan.
All right, cool. Hammoud from RBC. Hammoud.
Yeah, thanks, Bryan. My name is Hammoud Rabah. I'm Director of Cloud Security Integration here at RBC. I've been at RBC for about 10 years now, since 2010, so just coming up on 10 years. Started the better part of my career at RBC on the network security side. So deploying, building, supporting, and managing perimeter security applications and tools, ranging from firewalls, IDS, IPS, DDoS prevention, malware prevention, proxy solutions, and managing firewall administration, all of the fun that comes with that world. Fast forward to about 2018, I made the move over to the cloud side. So I've been now for the last year and a half, part of our RBC's cloud journey. So based out of Toronto, and what we're trying to do is enable the business move to cloud in a safe way. And what does that involve? So my role is really looking at how can we secure internet-facing workloads. And I think Kevin hit the nail on the head in his presentation. You can't just simply take your security solutions from your on-prem data centers and shift them over to cloud and say you're done. You really have to look from the ground up, understand what your business goals are, what you're trying to achieve, and tailor your security solutions so that you can best meet those needs and enable the organization to move forward. So that's really what I've been up to for the past couple of years at RBC, helping to adopt cloud security in an agile fashion. And yeah, I'm really glad to be here and open to sharing perspective and learning from the other panelists.
Excellent, cool. So here are our 5 elite speakers. So feel free to ask a question, submit your question to Q&A. So we will monitor that, also use that to ask our panelists. So I will start to ask them some of my questions, which I'm really eager to learn. So today we actually talk about agile cloud security, right? So the first keyword is agile. So what does that word mean to you? So I, from the project management background, is more like agile project management. But when we speak about cloud, speaking about cloud security, what does agile mean to you? So anyone can jump in to share your insights.
Sure, I can jump in maybe to start. I think for myself, agile means having a clear understanding of what the objectives are. What are you trying to achieve? So if you're looking at cloud, what capabilities are you trying to offer your organization? And then from a security perspective, how can we partner with our peers in order to deliver and at the right pace in a safe manner? So modifying our delivery methodology, adopting the agile framework, clearly defining our objectives, and delivering solutions so that our consumers can start to utilize those technology advancements as soon as possible.
Very cool. So adapt to the agile in the security world. Okay.
I can give you my 2 cents on that. So when you talk about agile, there's this term that comes to mind, right? So I think the first thing that people probably think about is speed, right? So agile is about moving fast. So let me put it in the very simple terms, right? So what happens when you drive fast, right? If you're a driver, what happens when you're in a car and you drive fast? Well, you get accidents, right? So when you move fast, undoubtedly that you make mistakes and bad things can happen. So what is agile security then? So agile security in my mind is just to allow the teams, the organization, and the developers to be able to move fast without those accidents. And well, not only that, if there eventually or evidently that accidents happened, is to allow the teams to be able to quickly discover and recover and be able to fix those accidents. So that to me is what agile security is about. Right? At the end of the day, that security team is there to enable the business to go fast and go fast, in a safe way with confidence.
Okay, very cool.
I think,
anyone else want to share?
Yeah, for sure. I think agile, we have an opportunity, especially as we start approaching the cloud, and certainly a lot of our customers are just starting that process. So some of it's greenfield, which is fantastic because here's an opportunity to adapt an agile framework without having to deal with legacy or an existing product, things you can't test, things you can't change easily. It's greenfield good. But in general, we're using these frameworks to time box work, inspect, understand what's working well, what's not working well, and finding strategies to continue to drive faster based on what's working well and what's not working well. We're building pipelines. We're building capabilities to front end everything we need to do in order to test and ensure that we're meeting the requirements where there's quality. quality meaning meeting the requirements, and those requirements include many requirements around security, and the security capabilities and frameworks, things that were talked about by the first two speakers today, are built to be used in these sorts of frameworks so that we can test early. We don't need to go deploy and then test afterwards, but we can assert and test in the process of development, which allows us to go faster. But you can't front load all of that without starting the process of agile development and understanding what's working, what's not working, and adding the right tools and updating the build pipelines and continually improving, because the agile process in general is not worth much.
Yeah, and I think another important factor here is if you look at a security solution end to end, it may take a long duration in order to complete that solution. So you need to understand what capabilities need to be delivered, at what point do they need to be delivered, and what part of your security solution can you deliver as part of that roadmap, so that you don't have to wait till you get to the end of your development to say we're ready to go live. So releasing in increments, I think that's another key thing that we need to keep in mind, and ensure that security can be done along that way.
All right, very cool. Anyone else, like Kevin and Albert?
I think I gave my vision on Agile a little bit already in the presentation, but I think like it's trying to do things smarter. We've been in this world of IT now for how many years, and now the last couple of years we've been handed tools that we actually can do companies that are amazing, which is driven by things like speed, right? But keeping a grip on that process, doing it securely, knowing what you're delivering and why you're delivering it, I think that is part of being agile as well. It's not just being fast or just being able to embrace new technology quickly. It's the whole process around it where you actually say, hey, we're able to embrace this new technology, and tomorrow it's something else, but we do it in a way that it actually makes sense, and we can actually add value, but also in a way that it doesn't hurt our business.
Okay,
I think
very cool.
Just one more thing, Bryan, to kind of add to like everybody else talked about. To me, the other key piece, I like how Andrew put in, very much a software developer at heart as well. So I like that whole process where you're constantly changing, morphing, like moving through those things. So I think that whole process of having stuff in source control and being very comfortable with, you know what, okay, I went and I've done a particular control, I put something in place. Don't make sure that's not a manual process. Make sure you can automate these things. So if something does happen to your environment, or you need to recreate an environment, like God forbid, because something like that happens, you should be able to be very comfortable with tearing down an environment completely and be able to stand it up from scratch and automate all those controls on top. It's not about any manual processes. Automate that stuff from end to end to end.
Yeah, and I just want to kind of highlight what Kevin just said, right? So I think it's critically important for security, and not just security, but compliance as well, to follow that engineering principle and the same practices. So I think, for as much as we can, if we as security professionals and as compliance people, we can do security as code or compliance as code, and also do incremental improvements and do small changes with quick turnarounds, just like development did, right? So or have been doing for many years. I think that's what agile security needs to become.
Okay, very cool. Okay, so I'd like to ask you another, maybe from different angle to look at that. So when we try to apply agile, so what kind of like some root problems are we trying to solve? Because agile is cool, cloud is cool, but eventually, what kind of root problems we want to use those cool tools to solve?
Yeah,
I would say that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, I was going to say that, things are evolving so rapidly. You can't wait a year to a year and a half to deliver something, because if you do, by the time you release your application or your solution out the door, the customer doesn't need that solution anymore. So you really need to understand, what you can deliver when, and be able to adapt and evolve. So, you may start off with a vision, and, 2 quarters of the way through, you find that you need to adjust because things have evolved. And I think that's what Agile is trying to solve.
I think, to me, there is one fundamental problem, right? You're asking about root cause, and this is my perspective on the root cause, which is the lack of visibility. When we start moving fast into the cloud and everything becomes software defined, and security team, this is one of the challenges I've experienced myself. Right, security teams, the reason that they're so nervous about people adopting larger organizations is because they kind of give control to developers, right? And not necessarily that's a bad thing, but it's just then security team all of a sudden lose the visibility to what's going on and lose control of what's happening, and rightfully so, they're concerned. Now, overall, I think in organizations with huge amount of complexity, visibility to that complexity is the challenge, is the root cause. So anything that you do, and whether it's responding to an incident or generating evidence for compliance, whatever the case might be, if you don't have the right amount of visibility into everything that's changing so fast, right, with every single code deploy, you just can't do it right. And it goes without saying, right, you cannot protect or you cannot fix what you can see. I think that is the number one kind of root problems so far.
Excellent.
I think we also need to be careful, though, because look, Agile means that there's so many different Agile frameworks out there. There's lots of Agile practitioners that have a great deal of experience in different frameworks, but there's always context. In the context of what we're actually trying to achieve as an organization, what this product's going to be, what our requirements are, functional requirements, non-functional requirements. And some of the Agile frameworks don't necessarily yield the results expected if you follow them blindly. So there's always context, and that context is critical, especially when we talk about things like security requirements and other things. We don't want to simply let teams go off and figure out, how to incrementally create an architecture that's going to meet a defined set of requirements. And where Agile, traditionally is a piece of it is, okay, we can't spend 6 months defining a requirements document, and we can't, and start some waterfall process and develop something, and a year later, for sure, it's not going to meet the needs of the customer because too much time has passed. At the same time, though, we're developing sophisticated software that has many potential vulnerabilities, or certainly we need to develop it in such a way where we're developing it to be secure. And those are cross-cutting requirements, which requires engineering practices that aren't necessarily considered by some of the, the books on different Agile frameworks. So my suggestion always is there's always adaptation. You need to adapt to what the key requirements are. And you need to figure out how to meet those key requirements, some of which are completely non-functional, and that's a trap, or a anti-pattern we see a lot in Agile, is sort of leaving it up to the teams to ensure they're meeting certain requirements, as opposed to injecting that security DNA, or injecting that scalability or SRE or reliability, injecting the DNA early so that what we build can be tested early against these requirements that we weren't thinking about because we were thinking about functional requirements in a traditional Agile process.
Yeah, I think building on what Erkang and Andrew just said, when I look at it and I think about this from a DevOps process, like that fundamental problem is definitely visibility. Take it out one level up, the challenge when it comes to Agile, it's not how most organizations work today. So that people and process side of the house when it comes to DevOps, changing the culture of an organization is actually really, really hard. You can't just essentially take the exact same team, or it's really hard to take the exact same team and say, okay, now just do this Agile. Having somebody that understands DevOps, that really understands Agile, use that as a training opportunity essentially for your team. Because you do need to change that people and culture side of the house to be able to help transform, so they have that mindset where it's okay to fail. Just essentially you're iterating quickly, you're moving quickly, you're essentially trying something like Hammoud said, and it's not working. It's okay to change gears. I'm not set in stone for the next 3 months, the next 6 months. It's we put a plan in place, move towards it, and understanding it's going to constantly change. And if you're not comfortable with change, it's going to be really, really tough.
I think it's an important point that you touched there, because Agile is not just a way of working for only your developers, but it's actually needs to be embraced by the whole company. And I've seen too many companies that say, hey, we have now our developers working with all kinds of delivery tools, giving us, but they never inform the IT admins or the InfoSec people to being able to adapt to that new way of working. And then they struggle with the concept to further to adapt to that. And so it's a mindset not for the person but for the company, and that takes sometimes a shift that takes time.
Yeah, and I think another key point there is embedding the security mindset early on. So, you know, from a security practitioner perspective, how many times have we been brought in at the end where you need to look at an application or something that the business is trying to release, and you know, because they're expecting to release, and then you come in and you have to say, no, we need to change your architecture, we need to make some fundamental design changes. So now injecting security from the beginning, and you know, working to embed your security as part of your design and architecture, that helps solve that problem, because as the developers are building their solution, security is being built along the way with it.
Yeah, and one thing I have to say though is we need to be careful of what security solutions and tools that we ingest into that process, right? I think we've all been there, especially the developers and the engineers here in the room or in the virtual room, because we all know that, you know, if you introduce something that generates so much noise or slows down the process or the pipeline, you know, developers are going to just say no. And they're gonna get tuned out, or they're gonna get frustrated, and they're gonna find ways around it. So I think that usability of that security tool in this DevOps process or in this pipeline, right? Especially if we want to move it early on, shift left or whatever you say, to that stage, it has to work well with the engineering practices.
And that's our opportunity, though. I mean, well said. Yep. That's our opportunity, because you know, where tools are available to move that left, to do it earlier, and to make it sort of part of the engineering practice, and make sure that we're testing against these things. And also, not everything's invented. There's best practices. There's frameworks. There's, everything Kevin was talking about. You know, there's mechanisms to ensure that you're building something that's secure. And we need to get developers on board with that as well, as opposed to sort of the old style of doing it, which is having them have to defend after the fact why they use a custom protocol here, or this connection wasn't encrypted, or whatever the case might be. It's, you know, ensure that it's easy to do those things and ensure it's correct to take the right path.
Yeah, and also, great. You know, by embedding it early on, if it doesn't work well, you'll know very early on if it doesn't work well, and you'll have time to adjust, time to choose new tools, or time to choose new solutions. If in the old world, how security came in at the end, it's too late to adjust. You have to really work hard and either delay what you're trying to do or jump through hoops to make it work, or, you know, accept risks.
Something like a startup, right? So you want to fail quickly and learn from there, then redo it. Okay, we do have some questions from the audience. One question is regarding the Agile. We talk about Agile, right? So what kind of popular Agile frameworks or process or tools can you recommend or can you talk about?
I can jump in there. So I think looking at Agile from my perspective, it's really how you are planning your work and how you're delivering it. So you need a way to track. You need a way to track your sprints and your epics and your features. So obviously tools like Jira and Confluence are really important. And you need a way to facilitate your daily stand-ups and your weekly demos and whatnot, your PI planning. So you need to have either the facilities to do that, or if you're a geographically dispersed organization, you need to have really solid tools, conferencing tools, to be able to facilitate those ceremonies. I think at a high level, that's what I would consider as key tools for delivering in an agile fashion.
Okay, team tools. And anyone else want to share?
Yeah. Well, I have to give a shout out to my own tool, Jupyter One, of course. And the reason I say that, right? So we actually first built this internally for our own use cases, and then we decided that, hey, well, why don't we make this available for everybody else to use? And the reason for that is going back to my previous comment on complexity, and also other people's comment on context, right? So you have to be able to make decisions around context, right? Not just visibility to things in a flat type of format. Is why we actually built Jupyter One, and the way to do that is by mapping out your digital operations, right? So I'm not just talking about the cloud environments, right? We have a lot of tools and solutions that would examine AWS and GCP and whatever case might be, the cloud infrastructure. I'm talking about something that can give visibility to the entire digital operation, from things like PRs in GitHub to Jira tickets to users in various single sign-on applications environments, to the trainings and the endpoint devices that these users have, and to the infrastructure itself in the cloud, and be able to make connections and essentially build a graph of how things are connected that give context to all of these things, right? So that's actually how we built Jupyter One. So that's why I want to give it a shout out to my own tool here, is to give visibility and context to these kind of millions of potential relationships in an organization's digital operations.
And
Cool.
tools and context for like that are fantastic. I'm just I'm of the mind at this point in my career that if you believe lock, stock, and barrel in a specific framework, and you're going to go with that regardless of the context, regardless of the state of the existing product or what you need to achieve or what the requirements might be, that you're probably going to fail. So it's there's lots of opportunities out there to choose different frameworks, to choose a Scrum or Extreme or whatever process you want. But if you're not matching different processes based on context, and you're not taking those processes and practices and maturing them based on what you're learning in the process, then it's rare that it's just going to yield some success because you've adopted some well-written about process. This is something that takes a lot of thought, especially as we try to do these things with the right level of quality. We're talking about security today, but if I'm building cloud-based applications, it's well more than security. Right. It's new types of architectures and engineering for scalability. I'm doing infrastructure as code, so all of a sudden, as a software engineer, I'm deploying networks, for instance, that I might not be an expert in, and what does that mean? And how do I make sure that I'm doing that appropriately both from a performance perspective and a scalability perspective and a security perspective? So there's a lot of expertise. It's actually an amazing time for people, whether you're a software developer or a network architect or security architect, to work together to get this stuff done. And I just don't know that there's a book that describes how to do this well. There's certainly a lot of opinions. I'm of the mind that you need to be able to measure stuff. And oftentimes we're not necessarily measuring the right things in a lot of these agile frameworks. And so I think it's constantly something that, both from a framework, process, and practice standpoint, and from a how you're going to approach it standpoint, it's all about continuous improvement. So you can't just roll something out with a consultant and get started and assume it's right. You need to constantly be assessing the success of what you're doing and what you can do better. Yeah,
exactly. We also have a question from the audience, because we talk about the tools, and you guys also mentioned tools are tools, right? So at the end of the day, really up to people to use them, right? So the team, especially the collaboration with the team. So there's a question say, okay, we are in the process to building our Agile cloud security team, very early stage. So what's your recommendation? So how can we build this the team, right? So what kind of criteria, what kind of people we can select, or what's some insights when you're building this Agile cloud security team?
Yeah, so maybe I can answer that, because I have the same struggle on the InfoSec side. And I think it is a world where we actually have to get closer together. So currently, like if I'm looking for new recruits in the world of InfoSec, I'm actually looking if they have like some experience with DevOps or programming or pipeline building, because I need people that actually understand the world of the developer, so we can actually help them to further secure that. I think on the side of the developers, you would like to do something similar, bring in some security knowledge as well, so you can actually bring those two worlds closer together. I know that is a challenge, but the only way to bridge that gap is to understand each other better and say, hey, we're trying to achieve the same thing. We want to deliver an application in a secure way. Let's find common ground and execute on that.
I think fundamentally, if you're going to build an Agile security team, first and foremost, you're going to need to have people with engineering skills on the security team. So having kind of traditional IT manager, admin type of compliance consultant type of teams on just to try to shift that type of skills to an Agile security team is just not going to work. They're just not going to be able to talk the language of the developers and the engineering teams. They're just always going to have conflicts. And one of them is always going to pull things back and the other one is going to try to move forward. So we have to first align the mindset and the skill set of those teams.
Yeah, exactly. It can't be this sort of, overlord security team that is disengaging developers. We're in this together.
Yep.
And if the mindset is we're in this together, then we'll find a way to be successful. And that means we're in mentoring roles, we're in learning roles. Everybody's mentoring and learning at the same time. It's a very special combination of people and management and leadership to try to drive that sort of, team dynamics that are critical for this.
I think just building on that, I think also like checking your ego at the door. So folks, to have that dynamic team, have that team that's constantly improving and changing, you have to be able to check your ego at the door. So if you got somebody that's essentially got a super strong voice, make sure you have some other folks in the team that can actually battle against that and talk through that. You want a lot of diversity. You want that change. You don't want to essentially have this is set in stone for this day and this is what we're going to do for the next 3 months. You want people giving feedback. You want people to have that mindset that we can always do better. We want to continuously improve.
Yeah, and I think another key thing there is for building your Agile security team, the people who are running your scrums and taking care of all the ceremonies, make sure you're not bringing in traditional project managers and putting them in that role, because they may not have the skill set. You want to bring somebody who has a really solid understanding of how Agile works and how to use the tools and how to speak the language, so that they can really report on the work, make sure it's being delivered in the right way, and keep things on track. And then another point I wanted to make is if you're trying to deliver in an Agile methodology in a large organization, I think you want a good mix of people on your team. So you want to bring in new cloud native folks who are going to bring fresh perspectives, but you also want to be able to have some insight into how the organization operates. So you need to have that balance. so that you're not just developing in a vacuum, and then when you go to open it up to the organization, you get pushback or challenges. So you kind of want to temper that as you go.
Maybe one example that I can share from the field is an organization that was actually restructuring their whole IT and InfoSec approach. They hired a new CISO and say, hey, you can only have 6 people in your team, but they had to manage like 50 different applications and security controls. And so what he did, he hired 4 InfoSec people and 2 developers, and more or less automated all the security tools in the best way possible. So I think that was a great example of a changing mindset where actually the IT admins and the InfoSec people actually embrace automation as a tool to help them out and integrate with the rest of the organization. And I would love to see that also in other organizations where they say, hey, we need to have more of these skill sets embedded. And traditionally, we look at threat researchers or people that can build a firewall, but we need other skills in the industry as well.
Yeah, no, exactly. One of the great things about cloud native development in general, or maybe just development these days, is developers are responsible for the CI/CD pipelines as well. So they're building the pipelines, they're building the software, and so if we can bring in these controls in an additive way to those CI/CD pipelines, as opposed to something after the fact, fantastic. But also there's a discussion to have with management, because developers are working on things that aren't features, they're pipelines, they're better ways to build, ensure it's secure. They're things that don't have a natural, demo affinity for somebody who's just looking for the next potential feature. So you have one set of cross-functional people building a system to deliver software repeatedly, because we're going to constantly update this thing. That's what they're building. It's their system to build an application and constantly upgrade it, ensure it's secure, ensure it scales, and all that other great stuff. And that's a great deal of work on its own, which that team is doing, as opposed to the traditional method where you might have a build manager and somebody who writes the make scripts and a QA team or other people that look at it afterwards. So there's, like with most things, in order to gain that efficiency and agility, there's work up front to accomplish it.
Okay. And I'd like to ask everyone, so Agile is a concept and also it's a process, it's a framework, or it's a project management methodology. People may have different view on that one. So how do you best communicate that concept with your peers, or with your boss, with your partner, or with your other peers? Especially for people like being in the industry for a long time. For example, I'm the project manager, so I got my PMP in 2006. Until now, I have a 14 years kind of experience in project management. I know a lot of traditional classic project management methodologies. How do you sell Agile to me? Or how can you convince me to work with you in the Agile journey?
Yeah, look, I saw that question that came in. I think it's a fantastic question. The idea that, look at a company like BlueCat. We produce software and our customers expect software, and we have roadmaps and we have release dates, and we have a lot of things that are anti-agile. Like there's a date somewhere, and the date's not just when it's going to be done, but we have customers that expect stuff done. And we can't do that. We can't combine the methodologies that we're using to produce releasable software with our requirements as a B2B business without project managers. They're not necessarily the project managers that are embedded in a team trying to help the team gain more efficiency. Maybe those people need more experience with software development, but it's the experience of a 20 years of project management is undeniably important for this world as it was the previous world. It's just the role that person plays in ensuring that you get to a point where you can release. And you're constantly measuring what those risks are and trying to mitigate what those risks are so that management and others understand what the output is and what they can expect and when, and what the risks might be and what the trade-offs might be. And those things require working across these different teams. There's not just one agile team. It's a complicated product. There's 5, 10. The largest I've ever had is 83 different Scrum teams on one product. You can't possibly coordinate that without experienced project managers.
Yeah, I think just building on that. Oh, go ahead, Hammoud.
I was just going to say, I definitely agree. You know, from my experience and from what I've seen, delivering in an agile fashion is really, it's just a different way of doing things. And it requires a little bit of a shift in how you look at the project and the delivery. And it's not to say that the experience of any of the project managers doesn't apply. It's just a different way of doing things. And if you get drop shipped into a program where you're supposed to deliver an agile project and you haven't been exposed to that before, you may struggle a little bit. So I feel that you need to have a mix of skills, and you can definitely transition from doing traditional waterfall project management to agile and back as you need, but you just need to have that exposure and have that experience so that you can deliver in the way that's expected when you're working in that agile world.
Yeah, I definitely agree on having a diverse team is awesome. So if you have a whole like-minded team, then you're probably not going to end up with the result that you want. But taking that example that Andrew is building out there, so if you have something in traditional sense, might be, I need to deliver something in 3 months, and here's the 10 requirements I need. From what we've been talking about, could be 2 weeks in, could be 3 weeks in. That 3 months isn't set in stone anymore. It's not about delivering to that 3 months. If after 2 weeks we try our first process, something doesn't work, that 3 months has just been completely disrupted. And that 3 month project plan that looked all perfect today, all of a sudden this afternoon or tomorrow morning, it's completely flipped on its head, and it's 100% change. So the team needs to get really comfortable with that. You need to be able to adapt to that. It's not about doing a bunch of requirements up front and then delivering on the 3 months. You're constantly getting feedback from your engineering team. If you've maybe released something really quick to get out to customers or some type of prototype, or you're piloting something, you got that feedback and everybody goes, yeah, this isn't meeting it at all. And you know what? You got to scrap that and almost essentially start again. So now everything's essentially getting reset, but it's about getting something out there, trying it. Obviously, if things are going forward and things are working well, you're going to meet more towards that 3 month timeline. If not, it's going to be could be a 180 degrees.
Yeah, exactly, Kevin. And without sort of combining some traditional view of project management, then you end up getting, well, it'll be done when it's done, or we had to make a change, or somebody needs to manage that process in a way that stakeholders can understand. And some of the outputs of the agile processes that are out there don't necessarily lend to the language that stakeholders need. But for sure, if you know after 2 weeks in a 3 month project that you need to completely turn this on the head, it's going to be different, it's going to take longer, whatever. Because if you found that out 2 weeks before the end of the 3 months, you would look like a garage shop.
Communication, and the also continuous learning, because the world is changing so fast. Just like those COVID-19 things. Originally, we pretty much get so comfortable with in-person, like a face-to-face team meeting. Now it's require us to all work from home. Then the communication, the way we working with team totally changed, right? So we need to adapt. So I think one of the key word in the agile world is really the adaptability. How do you adapt this one into your context? All right, cool.
What we found out over the last few weeks is, I mean, look, a lot of our developers have always, even if they're in the same team, communicate over Slack anyway, even if they're like 2 seats down from each other. So we've been able, even with everybody working from home, be able to keep synergy in teams with the tools that are available today, whether it's Zoom like we're using today or Slack or otherwise. But it's certainly, you know, a challenge when a lot of these ceremonies expect co-localization.
Yeah, and I want to add to that to say that you need to set up the right expectations, especially when things are changing rapidly. Setting up the right expectations is key. We actually have in my organization, we actually had a developer who once kind of mentioned to me, after failing a simulated phishing exercises, and he actually said, I don't get it. The emails and internet and browser are supposed to be protecting me. What do you mean I can't click on that link? Why aren't these tools doing its job of protecting me, right? So I think there are just things that is an example of setting up the right expectations to begin with. Mm-hmm. So when you kind of get caught in the middle of it, it's not a surprise. Right? So it's already communicated ahead of the time.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So that comes with education and communication, right? Mm-hmm. If you tell your people what to expect, hey, you can not always click on any link. Or if you develop an application, you need to make sure that you're using the right libraries. These are basic things that we should give our people, because we can build so many technology, but it's always the weakest link would be the person. And that is a fact that has been the case for 20, 30 years already, and will probably be in the next 30 years as well.
All right, cool. It's getting close to the session. It's 3 minutes left for our panel time. Thank you very much for all the panelists. Before we go, I'd like to ask each of you, what's your kind of parting advice or number one advice to people to achieve the Agile cloud security? If you can only share one insight, what kind of things you want to talk about? Just one.
I'm happy to go first.
I guess I can.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. I was just going to say my one thing would be break down barriers and go horizontal. So, operating in your traditional pillars where you're not necessarily engaged from the beginning. I think that's going to cause you to fail from the start. I think you need to break down the barriers. You need to go horizontal. You need to embed all the teams together and embark on the journey from the beginning as one big team rather than divided in your traditional pillars.
Yeah.
Okay.
And great point. But also, I would suggest experimentation in general. Like there's lots of ways to achieve certain things, and the best way for that specific situation usually comes from some level of experimentation. We hope to hire professionals who are able to experiment and come up with great ideas, and give them a little time and let them play.
Yeah,
okay.
Building on that, I was going to say, embrace change, and it's okay to fail. So have that fast iteration. The whole idea is you want that learning mindset. You want to be constantly learning each and every day.
There's so many things to learn.
So my one thing is going to be a little tactical, is actually something that Kevin touched on a little bit earlier in his talk, is to watch out for automation. There is actually a thing called too much automation. And because, especially things that the automations that make changes to your environment, mutations, right? So that Kevin mentioned, needs to be done with caution, right? Especially those out of the box automation that makes changes from kind of vendor solutions, that can actually not only cause confusion, because it wasn't aligned with your source of truth in your code, but it could oftentimes actually cause downtime in your production environment if it's not done carefully. An example I'll give is, for things like in GitHub, right? So you have things like Dependabot that will make a PR, and for auto promoting version changes, but it would not automatically merge or deploy that code to your environment, right? So why would you use out of the box automation to make actual changes to your critical production infrastructure? So that's my one thing. Just watch out for automation.
Watch out automation.
Mine would also be a little bit tactical. before you decide what you're going to protect, make sure that you have complete visibility on what's happening. Any security solution that you're going to implement is dependent on what is the real world. So I would always start first with visibility. And once you can create good visibility, you also know what is important and where to focus on first. Because you can maybe focus on maybe too small of a thing and miss other things that are there. So having visibility integrated in your pipeline, in your cloud, measuring your cloud posture, I think that would be a good start. And then from there, say, okay, this is first step, second step, third step. Define your priorities. Yeah.
Visibility is the key. And I like to share my one tip is really come to here and to listen to those industry experts, and their insights will help you to avoid a lot of common mistakes and also point out some future directions the industry is going. All right, thank you very much for all our panelists. Thank you very much for your time and come to share with us.